Hey all, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a little while, but not too long. Today you can see I'll be discussing dream analysis, becoming the dream. Now this is part of the wonderful series which is called Dreaming Moon series, created by Maha of Maha's Treasure Box. You may have seen my introduction video discussing the tag, and really this is going to host many topics around dreaming, considering some of the, again, many possibilities for dream exploration. The idea is that you can try them out or incorporate them into your practice based on what intrigues you. And there is quite the selection, which once I've got this up, I'm really looking forward to going back and watching. And they'll be trickling out throughout the month, but there are already some wonderful videos out by some wonderful creators. You may have already been aware of this or can see from the title, but my video is a podcast video, meaning there's nothing for you to see. So if you want to come back to this, if you'd rather listen to it at another time, or you want to get on with something else and just have me on in the background. So this is going to be about creating a dialogue with dreams. And firstly, I'll give a bit of a discussion about how I come at dream work personally and some of my history with dreaming. Then we'll move into the particular technique that I'm going to share with you. As often is the way, I feel like my own discussions are far less mysterious or magical and leaning heavily into psychological and emotional exploration through therapeutic doorways. Hopefully that makes sense to those of you who already know me, and to those who don't, I'll briefly explain. Naturally, as I have a career as a psychotherapist, my studies and practice have really informed my personal stance with dream work and how I explore these, and of course how I use tarot and all of those other things that I bring into my practice and craft. So it makes sense that my approach offers dream exploration predominantly through this avenue. I see dreams as aspects of our psyche, which are reflected into our dreamscape, weaving various stories and narratives. And today I've decided to share this one particular method of exploration to really narrow down the focus. I guess it could be considered a practical approach if you want to try it out. I feel like it's important to add as well that whilst I'm sharing this particular way of doing dream exploration, there are many avenues even within the psychotherapeutic framework. It's not the only way that I've personally found helpful, and it's not the only way that I've dream explored with myself or with clients. I'm really open to other avenues and actually really excited to try some of the methods in the series. I love the concept of ritual exploration, and I'm kind of surprised that I didn't think to bring tarot into this more already, and I know that that's a topic that's going to be discussed, so that's exciting. And it really is the beauty of dream work. My stance is one of empowering the individual to find their meaning rather than being told it from someone else. This way that I'm sharing is just a way that I have found helpful, cathartic, and one of many that led me down a path to gaining clarity whilst exploring my dreams. So a brief bit of dream history, and then I promise that we're getting on to the good stuff. I've had a passion for exploring dreams, or more so even acknowledging them, from quite a young age actually, and really wanting to find out what they mean, but maybe not quite getting there. I was never one for the prescriptive dream dictionaries. Even as a child, I found the concept of the exploration really interesting, but the books, which I was bought several when I was younger, they didn't seem to provide the answers or support the exploration that I wanted, and it just didn't happen for me. I'd read them and it felt so disconnected to my gut feeling about the dream. Even though I didn't quite understand them, the meanings, they weren't resonating with me. And my experience of dreaming is quite a long documented and powerful one, in that even as a child I experienced really vivid dreams. I had repetitive dreams, the longest of which was around 6 months long without a break during my teens. I've had lucid dreams, waking visions, and also some that I would refer to as nightmares or night terrors. So a really mixed bag, and someone who has remembered more than one dream a night very often as well. And I'm aware that these were often a reflection of emotional turmoil I was experiencing or suppressing or reliving, as well as, some of the nicer dreams representing how I was feeling and things like that as well. So my dreams, they have considerable fairy tale or fantasy elements to them. They're wildly interesting to me, and they bring a certain movie magic, more sort of Harry Potter magic and stuff like that, to my dreamscape, which I really wished for in real life as a kid, so it makes total sense to me. The one thing about this, though, is that the dreams can be so fascinating as a whole story. It kind of cheekily detracts me from the emotional exploration, and I find myself being coaxed into an analytical stance of the overview, and that is why I've chosen this particular theory, becoming the dream. And really what I wanted and what I was so eager for was an understanding. As I walked down my path, I was then able to find ways to explore and decipher them, rather than just having these concepts sort of swimming around in my mind and in my journal. And really understand how these bring in unconscious elements of process, or shining a light on some shadows, playing out experiences in the hope of moving through these, and learning to navigate in a kind of exploratory narrative rather than taking the dream on face value. So to the good stuff. Sorry, but it felt like that was important to kind of give you a summary. Becoming the dream is a concept I'm sharing from Gestalt therapy, more specifically Fritz Perls, the father of Gestalt. I'm fortunate to have 2 Gestalt therapists in my family amongst their other training, and so within this there are concepts and ideas, theory and practice that I'm able to learn and discuss with them, as well as study on my own. As an adult, I've always come at dream analysis in this sort of more psychological way, but becoming the dream is something that my step-granddad introduced to me, and is newer to me than some of the others, but something that I really love. I really appreciate the work of many, Freud, Jung. These are concepts that many are familiar with, even outside of therapy world. I think Jung in particular has possibly touched the world of tarot most frequently, as his models have really been interwoven and discussed in various books that cross over these 2 paths. But I wanted to bring something a little bit different and maybe a little bit less familiar to everyone. So in the concept from Gestalt, we're talking to each aspect of the dream as it's a reflection of the self, meaning that we are every aspect of the dream. Fritz said, "You are the maker of the dream. Whatever you put into the dream must be what is in you." So bringing the dream to life in order for the individual to engage, process and be present with their exploration of the dream, and encouraging autonomy throughout. We invite each aspect to have a voice and ask them what they represent or feel, opening a dialogue and allowing ourselves to see what comes through. I prefer this concept of individual dream work as an acknowledgement that anything can represent something different for each individual person, because we're layered and multifaceted. So what, losing your teeth means to you could mean something completely different to me, as opposed to, I can't remember, but coming away from that which is prescriptive and what that prescriptive method may prevent. So someone else walking into your world and translating a dream that came from your conscious, it could completely miss the mark. And in the same way as it would be done in therapy, the client's facilitated to explore themselves, not advised or characterised by the therapist. The acknowledgement that as an individual we hold the most information on ourselves, although it is something that we're looking to explore and understand. Now, I'm not an expert on this concept, and I'm not trying to give this in a perfect way or it to require something that needs extra training or studying. I was really keen to jump in with the dream series, and this is what I have in my arsenal. My suggestion is we remember to keep questions to ourselves open, and that because you're not being facilitated by another, it could be a little bit more challenging to host this. So take it step by step. Maybe journal to see the narrative with yourself and how you came to be at an understanding. Remember, our dreams come from our conscious, so they are a part of us, not external to us. And for anyone concerned who maybe doesn't keep a dream journal or doesn't have such deep recollection of everything throughout their dreams, and you more recall snippets of them, that's fine. It's really not necessary to recall everything in order to explore a dream anyway. So Fritz's definition of this is, my task is to keep your awareness in the present and to frustrate your every attempt to move out of the present. Now, of course, we're going to be facilitating our own dream exploration, and Fritz was coming from the view of a therapist holding space for another. So creating this space for yourself, as I said, might feel a little more challenging, but it's not impossible at all, nor is there meant to be a perfect outcome, but rather coming to the feeling of having processed or realising something that allows you space for an understanding and movement forwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the, bullet points, and then I'm going to give you a very loose, very rough example at the end. We want to start off by explaining and recapping the dream so that you have an understanding of the parts that you feel are necessary to know as part of your exploration. As we're doing this as an individual practice, I do wonder if writing it down or having an external way of viewing it could be something that helps you explore that dialogue. You may even decide to record yourself if that's a preferred option. So we explain and recap the dream. Once we've recapped the dream, we then return to discuss the dream as if it's in present. So we're telling it as a story that's being lived right here, right now. And whilst we do this, encourage yourself to consider what aspects stick out for you in this moment. It may even be that's once you've recalled the dream, you then write it down in first person. And once you find something that sticks out for you, this is what we're going to first explore. So step 3 is when we really get into becoming the dream. And bear with, because this may feel a bit wacky at first for those unfamiliar. Now, whether you've chosen to focus on a person or an object, because remember, the theory is that we are everything in the dream. Next, we're going to become whatever it is we've chosen. What I've done is I've just written down a few example questions to ask ourselves when we're becoming this symbol or object. I've focused much more on objects for this, and we really want to be descriptive when we're doing this. So some of my example questions are, what colour am I? Do I make a sound? What is that sound? Do I have a taste? What's my size? Do I have anything to say? What's my intention? We may move into what I feel like physically, is it soft, hard, textured, warm, cold? And we may even move into what we want or need as this object. So what we're doing is beginning to build a picture of ourselves as the object, and we can come back and look at this externally, which is why I said having something written down would probably be my main suggestion or preference, but that's just me. One of the reminders for this part is that, and this is more, not more, but this is especially for me as well, who loves a good story. We're not trying to find an ending to the dream or create an understanding based on its interpretation of this necessarily as a whole. The idea of this is to be practical and explorative and really get into it. And this is why I said when you're facilitating it alone, you may take a few moments away from what you've written down and then come back into the mode of the explorer rather than the object. So looking back upon what you've said and focusing on what sort of processes come up for you. An additional thing that I pulled out of a book by Gay Houston is the reminder that we, the dreamer, are in control. So this can be a very supportive thing to remember. The dream exists inside of us, and whilst visiting more uncomfortable or scarier aspects, it could very well feel confronting. We hold the ability to tend to ourselves and comfort ourselves if needed. The challenge is still to stay in that space and stay present. So we're holding space for the exploration, but not providing interpretations in that analytical sense. If you find yourself contemplating how this may relate to last Wednesday, then you've probably come out of the present. So we've gone through all of the descriptive exploration as the object, and now we want to open a dialogue. We want to create a back and forth with ourselves as the object and the dream explorer. Starting with one object, although you can move around and you can explore as many as you need or desire. And really what I'm encouraging you to do is just retain an awareness of what happens within you during the exploration, not just the dialogue, but whether you're feeling something physically or emotionally as well. Remaining focused on your process in the present within that dialogue will again add to your understanding. And you may even ask what you need from the object, as well as what you feel the object needs when you're becoming it. I hope that makes sense and you're following this. If you're not, I'm sorry. As I say, I'll do an example in a minute as well. Don't rush this, take as much time as you need. And the final step really is, once you've done this, see what you've learned from your experience, what arose, where this brings you to now, and how this may help you process something that you wasn't aware of, or you were, wasn't in your present conscious. maybe it was being suppressed, maybe it was being avoided. And be gentle with yourself is kind of a given throughout all of this. And that is the steps as broken down by myself in the best way that I could muster. And I'm going to give you my example. And I really want to emphasise that it's short and simple, it's imperfect, and it's merely a glimmer into the narrative you may have with yourself. I really wanted to make this approachable, so that it didn't become overly complicated. We're not training in this, we're just gently utilising aspects of this technique for our own personal practice. So that's really my hope and my aim for this. Okay, so my dream example, and I'm going to tell this as if in the present to save us time. So I already know it, now I'm going to speak it. I'm in my grandparents' house, it's dark and I'm alone. As I stand at the bottom of the stairs, I notice that the house has started to flood. I'm scared and the water is becoming deeper and deeper rapidly. I rush to the top of the stairs and now I'm looking around at the dark room surrounding, and I look up to its ceiling. There's no windows and I know I can't get out. I'm trapped, alone, and I feel like I'm going to drown. So there we have some basic brief example of me being in my dream. And we can break this down even further. So for me, my focus is the flood. That's the part that stood out for me. This big, rapid, deep flood that's overcoming the house. So I start to be descriptive about the flood. And again, this is very, very short. As the flood, I'm powerful and cold. I'm filling the house, taking everything with me, eating it up as it submerges my depths. I'm dark and silent. My aim is to take over all the house and its contents. So very simple, but a few descriptive, a bit of a view of the flood's intent, which you may not already have all of the intent. And that's totally okay, because we then move into the dialogue anyway. So really be as descriptive as you can, because that will be helpful. Finally is the dialogue, and I had a hard time working out how to share this with you because it's possibly easier to read it. I don't have special voices in my arsenal either, because that could have been fun and entertaining and made it easier to track. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a very simple example. It's not perfect. I've looked over it several times and looked at ways I could adjust it, but I'm just going to roll with it. And I will just read them very quickly. Now remember, this process is probably a lot longer, and I'll just state whether I'm asking as the explorer or the flood, just to give you a very brief idea of the back and forth. This could be longer or shorter or go in a completely different direction, so it really is down to you. But they're just examples of remaining present with what's coming up, and how what's coming up may be different to what you'd have anticipated or even analysed had you have come at this in a different way. So as the explorer, I begin by asking myself, be the flood powerful and cold? Flood, I'm uncomfortable. Explorer, say that again, step into this. Flood, I'm uncomfortable and I feel out of control. Explorer, so you're out of control. What's happening? Flood, I'm not sure. It's really confusing. Explorer, stay with this feeling of being out of control and really confused. Flood, I don't want to. Explorer. Okay, stay with not wanting to. What do you want to say about not wanting to? Flood. I'm scared and I'm trying to contain my feelings, but I'm struggling to. Explorer. What happens if you don't contain it? Flood. It will spill out everywhere and everyone will know. Explorer. What if everyone knows? Flood. I'll feel vulnerable. Explorer. Stay with this vulnerability. Really feel it out. Flood. I really don't want to. Explorer. I've noticed you stiffen. What are you aware of right now? Flood. I feel when I'm vulnerable, people leave me, and I don't want to be left. Explorer. What do you want? Flood. I want to open a window so that I can let some of this out. I don't want to keep holding it in and be tough. I want to feel like I can be vulnerable and that that's okay. Now, you may continue this, or when you come to a realisation, as this one does, it kind of comes to a pivotal point where we understand what's going on as the object or item or person. We might explore what you then want to tell yourself, speaking back to the flood or whatever it is. I'll grant this is very short and very rough. I just wanted to give you an example, and I realised it's not the easiest thing to record by yourself. I think that the important thing was you just had a couple of examples of how to respond to when we bring up that sense of vulnerability, or when I said I felt out of control and confused, not coming away from this but really staying present in it, although there's no force. So when it comes to I don't want to, okay, so what do we want to say? Why don't we want to? What's happening? And we really get into the core of this version of myself as the flood actually represented something quite different than what it first may have seemed. So hopefully you followed that and it made some sense to you. There's lots of information on the net anyway. Mine's not particularly new or profound. But for me, practicing this particular style of dream exploration has been a really worthwhile challenge to step away from my desire to kind of analyse in more of an intellectual capacity, to intellectualise things. It's very present. It kind of feels demanding at times because in facilitating it, we don't move ourselves away from the experience. We're really taking responsibility to be in the moment, and we're also holding space for whatever comes up, whether it's comfortable or not. As I say, there was no actual force, but at the same time we stay with it and we allow ourselves to experience it. And of course, none of that emotional process will come across with me having to record the two parts as if I'm a robot, so I had to read it off of a piece of paper, but you get the idea. So, I'll confess, after getting very excited for this series, I did begin to feel a little dubious of sharing my own. The perfectionist kind of reared up into me, and I, as I say, became aware that it would be hard to fully give an example of the dialogue. It's something that if I was sitting with you, it would be realms easier. But being a perfectionist is not useful for me, so this was an interesting challenge nonetheless. I do want to make it clear again that I am not training anyone to do this with anyone else either. As I say, this is a tool for us to use if you fancy trying it out yourself. My hope is that in keeping it simple, I've managed to outline the basis of what you need to practice it with yourself. It's just a process, so if you find that you're getting in your own way, then that's totally normal. Really just try and roll with it if you try it out, because it's just for you, no one else is going to see it. And I think it's probably important to add that that was a dream from my childhood, and so therefore it's a dream that's been in my mind for several decades. It's one that I never truly came to a complete understanding with it. I got some of the fear and some of the narratives, but kind of went off in various directions. And being the flood actually helped open that portal of what I was not able to tap into, and it helped me to engage with the bit I'd been missing. But if it sounds very finished or neat, or I mean, I don't know how it could sound neat. It was really rough. I actually got really ill this month and had some health scare, and I'll be honest, I have had this in my mind for a really, really long time, but it's just not as neat as I'd have liked it. But that being said, if you feel like mine's very finished, then I'm very, very familiar with this and the process of it. And of course, it was more of an emotional experience when I did it the first time, as opposed to sort of repeating it and having to do the stiffer dialogue, so you could see the differences between explorer, or whatever you want to call them, you know, you being the explorer and you being the object. So there you have it. It's my loose example of becoming the dream. Whether it's the sky or the rain or a bus driver or a house, you know, nothing is too obscure. That's kind of the whole point. We are it all. And I'm going to leave it there because this has been long and it's been rambly. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, as always. And let me know, you know, did you follow it? Did it make sense? If you made it this far, thank you for listening, and I will catch you all again soon.